Question 1. Analysis of the most effective approach to conducting a risk assessment for a newly deployed VMware Cloud Foundation environment, considering potential threats to data integrity and service availability, and the need for a scalable and repeatable process. Option A. Implement a continuous risk assessment process that integrates automated vulnerability scanning, threat intelligence feeds, and regular penetration testing, with findings mapped to specific VMware Cloud Foundation components and their associated business impact. Option B. Conduct a one-time, comprehensive risk assessment using a generic IT risk checklist, focusing primarily on network security configurations and assuming all other components are inherently secure. Option C. Perform a reactive risk assessment only after a security incident has occurred, documenting the incident and identifying the root cause to prevent recurrence. Option D. Rely on vendor-provided security documentation and assume that all risks are adequately addressed by the VMware Cloud Foundation platform's built-in security features. The correct answer is A. Implement a continuous risk assessment process that integrates automated vulnerability scanning, threat intelligence feeds, and regular penetration testing, with findings mapped to specific VMware Cloud Foundation components and their associated business impact. Explanation. This scenario presents a common challenge in cloud professional roles, balancing the need for comprehensive risk assessment with the practical constraints of a rapidly evolving VMware cloud environment. The professional must identify potential threats and vulnerabilities without causing undue disruption or incurring excessive costs. The challenge lies in selecting a risk assessment methodology that is both effective and aligned with the organization's risk appetite and regulatory obligations, which for this exam are assumed to be governed by a framework analogous to general IT best practices and data protection principles, without specific jurisdictional mandates beyond the exam's scope. The correct approach involves a systematic and iterative process that prioritizes risks based on their potential impact and likelihood. This aligns with best practices in information security and risk management, emphasizing proactive identification and mitigation. By focusing on a structured methodology, the professional ensures that all critical areas are covered and that resources are allocated efficiently to address the most significant threats. This approach is ethically sound as it demonstrates due diligence in protecting the organization's assets and data. An incorrect approach might involve a superficial or ad hoc assessment. This could lead to overlooking critical vulnerabilities, resulting in potential data breaches, service disruptions, or non-compliance with internal policies or general data protection principles. Such an approach fails to meet the professional standard of care expected of a cloud professional. Another incorrect approach could be to focus solely on technical vulnerabilities without considering the business impact, leading to misallocation of resources or the implementation of controls that do not adequately address the organization's overall risk exposure. This demonstrates a lack of holistic understanding and can result in ineffective risk management. Professionals should adopt a decision-making process that begins with understanding the organization's objectives and risk tolerance. This is followed by selecting an appropriate risk assessment framework, e.g., NIST RMF, ISO 31000 principles, identifying assets and threats, analyzing vulnerabilities, determining the likelihood and impact of potential risks, and then prioritizing these risks for mitigation. Regular review and updates to the risk assessment are crucial due to the dynamic nature of cloud environments. Question 2. Governance review demonstrates that the organization's VMware cloud adoption has been largely driven by individual project teams independently selecting and deploying services, leading to a fragmented and unmanaged environment with potential security and compliance gaps. Which approach best addresses this situation to ensure robust governance and alignment with organizational objectives? Option A. Establish a centralized cloud governance committee responsible for defining and enforcing policies, evaluating new service requests based on a defined risk framework, and providing a formal approval process before deployment. Option B. Develop a comprehensive set of technical controls that automatically block the deployment of any unapproved cloud services, without a formal review process for exceptions. Option C. Empower individual project teams to continue selecting and deploying services, but implement a mandatory post-deployment audit to identify and remediate any governance or compliance issues. Option D. Delegate cloud governance responsibilities entirely to the security team, who will then approve or reject service requests based solely on their security assessment. Correct answer is A. Establish a centralized cloud governance committee responsible for defining and enforcing policies, evaluating new service requests based on a defined risk framework, and providing a formal approval process before deployment. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario presents a common challenge in cloud environments where the rapid pace of deployment can outstrip the formalization of governance processes. The challenge lies in balancing the need for agility and innovation with the imperative to maintain compliance, security, and operational stability. Without a clear framework for evaluating and approving new cloud services, organizations risk introducing shadow IT, security vulnerabilities, and increased operational complexity, all of which can have significant financial and reputational consequences. The professional challenge is to identify and implement a robust governance process that is both effective and adaptable. Correct approach analysis. Adopting a centralized, risk-based approach to cloud service governance represents best professional practice. This involves establishing a dedicated cloud governance committee or function responsible for defining policies, evaluating new service requests against predefined risk criteria, security, compliance, cost, operational impact, and providing clear approval or rejection with justification. This approach ensures that all cloud service adoptions are aligned with organizational strategy, regulatory requirements, as defined by the relevant jurisdiction for 2V0-33. 22, which implies adherence to VMware's own best practices and potentially industry-specific regulations if applicable to the VMware Cloud Professional role and security standards. It promotes consistency, accountability, and a proactive stance on risk management and correct approaches analysis. Implementing a decentralized ad hoc approval process where individual teams select and deploy cloud services without central oversight is a significant regulatory and ethical failure. This leads to a lack of visibility, inconsistent security configurations, potential compliance breaches, e.g., data residency, privacy regulations, and duplicated efforts, all of which increase the organization's risk profile. It undermines the principle of accountability and can lead to uncontrolled expenditure. Allowing services to be deployed first and then retrospectively reviewed for governance compliance is also a failure. This reactive approach means that risks have already been introduced and potentially exploited. It demonstrates a lack of due diligence and foresight, failing to meet the professional obligation to proactively manage risks and ensure adherence to established standards and regulations. Establishing a governance process that is overly bureaucratic and slow to approve requests, thereby stifling innovation, is also professionally suboptimal. While governance is crucial, an inefficient process can lead to teams circumventing it, resulting in shadow IT and the aforementioned risks. It fails to strike the necessary balance between control and agility, potentially hindering the organization's ability to leverage cloud technologies effectively. Professional reasoning. Professionals should adopt a structured, risk-aware decision-making framework. This involves 1. Understanding the organization's strategic objectives and risk appetite. 2. Establishing clear, documented policies and procedures for cloud service adoption. 3. Implementing a multifaceted evaluation process that considers security, compliance, cost, and operational impact. 4. Ensuring clear roles and responsibilities for governance and approval. 5. Fostering communication and collaboration between IT, security, legal, and business units. 6. Regularly reviewing and updating the governance framework to adapt to evolving technologies and threats. Question 3. System analysis indicates a client requires an expedited migration of their critical workloads to a VMware cloud environment to meet an aggressive market launch deadline. The client has provided a high-level overview of their data sensitivity and compliance obligations, but has not detailed specific regulatory requirements. As a VMware cloud professional, what is the most appropriate initial step to ensure a compliant and secure migration? Option A. Conduct a detailed assessment of the client's specific regulatory obligations and data handling requirements, and map these to the security and compliance features of the proposed VMware cloud solution before proceeding with any migration activities. Option B. Prioritize the client's deadline by implementing a basic VMware cloud infrastructure and deferring all security and compliance configurations until after the workloads are operational. Option C. Immediately proceed with the migration using standard VMware cloud deployment templates, assuming the client's existing security measures will suffice, and address compliance concerns post-deployment. Option D. Rely on the client's IT team to manage all security and compliance aspects of the migration, focusing solely on the technical deployment of the VMware cloud infrastructure. The correct answer is C. Immediately proceed with the migration using standard VMware cloud deployment templates, assuming the client's existing security measures will suffice, and address compliance concerns post-deployment. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge due to the inherent tension between a client's desire for rapid deployment and the critical need for robust security and compliance within a VMware cloud environment. The VMware Cloud Professional (VCP) must balance business objectives with regulatory adherence, ensuring that the chosen solution not only meets functional requirements, but also satisfies all applicable VMware Cloud Professional regulations and guidelines relevant to the exam's jurisdiction. The VCP's judgment is paramount in navigating these competing priorities. The correct approach represents best professional practice because it prioritizes a thorough understanding of the regulatory landscape before committing to a specific technical solution. This proactive stance ensures that security and compliance are integrated from the outset, rather than being an afterthought. Adhering to the VMware Cloud Professional Regulatory Framework, which emphasizes due diligence, risk assessment, and adherence to established best practices for data protection and service delivery, is a fundamental ethical and professional obligation. This approach minimizes the risk of noncompliance, potential data breaches, and subsequent reputational damage or legal repercussions. An incorrect approach that focuses solely on speed without adequate security and compliance validation is professionally unacceptable. This would represent a failure to uphold the VCP's duty of care and could lead to regulatory violations, specifically neglecting to assess the impact of the chosen VMware cloud services on data residency requirements, access controls, or audit logging mechanisms would contravene typical regulatory frameworks that mandate such considerations. Another incorrect approach, such as implementing a solution based on assumptions about the client's internal security posture without independent verification, also poses a significant risk. This bypasses essential due diligence steps and could result in a deployment that is vulnerable to threats, thereby failing to meet the professional standard of providing secure and reliable cloud services. The professional decision-making process for similar situations should involve a structured approach. First, clearly define the client's business objectives and technical requirements. Second, conduct a comprehensive review of all applicable regulatory and compliance frameworks relevant to the client's industry and the chosen VMware cloud services. Third, perform a thorough risk assessment, identifying potential security and compliance vulnerabilities. Fourth, design a solution that demonstrably addresses these risks and meets regulatory obligations, integrating security and compliance controls from the ground up. Finally, document all decisions, assessments, and implemented controls to ensure transparency and auditability. Question 4. Quality control measures reveal that a key business unit is requesting the expedited deployment of a new customer-facing application on the VMware cloud environment, citing aggressive market deadlines. The business unit lead has indicated a willingness to bypass the standard security review and compliance validation processes to accelerate time to market, suggesting that the application is low risk and that the standard procedures are overly bureaucratic. As a VMware cloud professional, what is the most appropriate course of action? Option A. Immediately refuse the request, citing the non-negotiable nature of security and compliance protocols, and instruct the business unit to follow the standard procedures without offering any alternative solutions. Option B. Proceed with the application deployment as requested, prioritizing speed to market over standard security and compliance checks based on the business unit's assurance of low risk. Option C. Engage with the business unit lead to understand the specific business drivers and deadlines. Clearly explain the rationale behind the existing security and compliance framework, and explore potential expedited review pathways, pre-approved configurations that align with organizational policy and risk appetite. Option D. Implement the application with only the most basic security controls, assuming the business unit's assessment of low risk is accurate, and deferring comprehensive validation until after the initial launch. The correct answer is C. Engage with the business unit lead to understand the specific business drivers and deadlines. Clearly explain the rationale behind the existing security and compliance framework, and explore potential expedited review pathways or pre-approved configurations that align with organizational policy and risk appetite. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario presents a common challenge in cloud professional roles, balancing the immediate needs of a business unit with the long-term strategic and compliance implications of cloud adoption. The stakeholders' request for rapid deployment of a new application, bypassing standard security and governance protocols, creates a direct conflict between business agility and the organization's commitment to regulatory adherence and risk management. The professional must navigate this tension by upholding established policies while seeking to facilitate the business unit's objectives through compliant means. The challenge lies in the potential for perceived obstructionism versus the critical need to prevent security breaches, data loss, or regulatory penalties. Correct approach analysis. The correct approach involves engaging with the stakeholder to understand the urgency and the specific business drivers behind the request. It then requires clearly articulating the existing governance framework, including the rationale for security and compliance checks, and offering alternative, expedited pathways within that framework. This might involve pre-approved security configurations, streamlined review processes for low-risk deployments, or temporary exceptions with defined mitigation strategies and sunset clauses, all documented and approved by relevant authorities. This approach represents best professional practice because it upholds the organization's commitment to security and compliance, as mandated by VMware's own best practices and potentially by industry-specific regulations, e.g., GDPR, HIPAA, depending on the jurisdiction and data handled. It demonstrates a proactive and collaborative problem-solving attitude, fostering trust and ensuring that innovation occurs within a secure and controlled environment. This aligns with the principle of security by design and compliance by design, inherent in responsible cloud management. Incorrect approaches analysis. Directly refusing the request without offering alternatives or explanation is professionally unacceptable because it fails to address the business need and can damage stakeholder relationships. Demonstrates a lack of understanding of business objectives and a rigid adherence to process that can stifle innovation. This approach could lead to shadow IT, where the business unit seeks to bypass official channels entirely, creating even greater security and compliance risks. Proceeding with the deployment without adhering to established security and governance protocols is a severe regulatory and ethical failure. This directly violates the organization's internal policies and potentially external regulations governing data protection and system integrity. It exposes the organization to significant risks, including data breaches, financial penalties, reputational damage, and loss of customer trust. This demonstrates a disregard for professional responsibility and a failure to act in the best interest of the organization. Attempting to implement the application with minimal security controls based on the stakeholder's assurance is also professionally unsound. It represents a failure to exercise due diligence and a reliance on subjective assurances rather than objective security assessments. This approach ignores the principle of least privilege and the need for robust security measures, even for seemingly low-risk applications, as vulnerabilities can be exploited in unexpected ways. It also fails to meet the professional obligation to ensure the integrity and security of the cloud environment. Professional reasoning. Professionals in cloud environments must adopt a risk-based collaborative approach. When faced with urgent requests that challenge existing protocols, the decision-making process should involve 1. Understanding the business context and urgency. 2. Clearly communicating the existing governance framework and its rationale. 3. Identifying potential compliant acceleration paths or temporary risk-mitigated exceptions. 4. Documenting all decisions and approvals. 5. Continuously monitoring and reviewing the implemented solutions. This framework ensures that business objectives are met while maintaining the highest standards of security, compliance, and ethical conduct. Question 5. Stakeholder feedback indicates that the deployment of new virtual machines and the provisioning of associated network resources within the VMware cloud environment are taking longer than anticipated, impacting project timelines. As a VMware cloud professional, which approach would best address this process and efficiency while adhering to best practices for operational excellence? Option A. Streamline the provisioning process by removing all approval gates and manual verification steps to expedite the delivery of resources, prioritizing speed over thoroughness. Option B. Conduct a thorough analysis of the current VM and network provisioning workflows, identifying specific bottlenecks, manual intervention points, and areas for automation. Subsequently, implement targeted automation scripts and refine existing procedures based on data-driven insights. Option C. Implement a generic, off-the-shelf provisioning template that has been successful in other IT environments, assuming it will directly translate to optimal performance in this specific VMware cloud setup. Option D. Immediately procure and deploy a suite of new third-party automation tools that promise faster provisioning, without a detailed assessment of their integration with the existing VMware stack or their impact on current operational procedures. The correct answer is B. Conduct a thorough analysis of the current VM and network provisioning workflows, identifying specific bottlenecks, manual intervention points, and areas for automation. Subsequently, implement targeted automation scripts and refine existing procedures based on data-driven insights. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario presents a common challenge in cloud professional roles, balancing the desire for rapid feature deployment with the need for robust, compliant, and efficient operational processes. Stakeholder pressure for speed can lead to shortcuts that compromise long-term stability and adherence to VMware Cloud professional best practices and any applicable regulatory frameworks governing data handling and service availability. The professional must navigate these competing demands, ensuring that process optimization efforts are strategic and sustainable, rather than purely reactive or superficial. The challenge lies in identifying the root causes of inefficiency and implementing solutions that are technically sound, operationally viable, and align with organizational policies and potential compliance requirements. Correct approach analysis. The correct approach involves a systematic, data-driven methodology to identify bottlenecks and inefficiencies within the existing VMware Cloud deployment and operational processes. This includes leveraging VMware's own best practices and recommended operational frameworks, such as those outlined in the 2V0-33.22 syllabus, which emphasize continuous improvement and proactive problem solving. By analyzing key performance indicators, KPI, related to deployment times, resource utilization, incident resolution, and user satisfaction, the professional can pinpoint specific areas for optimization. Implementing changes based on this analysis, such as automating repetitive tasks, refining resource allocation strategies, or improving monitoring and alerting mechanisms, directly addresses the identified issues. This approach ensures that process improvements are targeted, measurable, and contribute to overall service quality and efficiency, aligning with the professional responsibility to maintain a high-performing and reliable cloud environment. Incorrect approach is analysis. Implementing a broad, unvalidated set of new tools without a clear understanding of their impact on existing workflows or their alignment with current operational procedures is a significant failure. This approach risks introducing more complexity and potential points of failure, rather than resolving existing inefficiencies. It bypasses the critical step of diagnosing the actual problems, leading to wasted resources and potentially exacerbating the issues. Focusing solely on reducing the number of steps in a process without considering the purpose or necessity of each step is another failure. This can lead to the removal of essential validation or security checks, increasing the risk of errors, compliance violations, or security breaches. Process optimization must maintain or enhance the integrity and security of the system, not simply shorten the path. Adopting a one-size-fits-all solution that has been successful in a different environment, without proper assessment of its applicability to the current VMware Cloud infrastructure and its specific operational context, is also professionally unsound. Each cloud environment has unique configurations, workloads, and user requirements. A solution that is not tailored to these specifics is unlikely to yield optimal results and may even be detrimental. Professional reasoning. Professionals in this role must adopt a structured problem-solving approach. This begins with active listening to stakeholder feedback to understand their concerns. The next step is to gather objective data through monitoring, logging, and performance metrics. This data should then be analyzed to identify root causes of inefficiency. Based on this analysis, potential solutions should be evaluated against criteria such as impact, feasibility, cost, and alignment with best practices and any relevant regulatory guidelines. The chosen solution should be implemented incrementally, with clear success metrics defined beforehand. Continuous monitoring and feedback loops are essential to ensure the optimization is effective and sustainable. This iterative, data-driven, and context-aware approach ensures that process improvements are robust, compliant, and deliver tangible benefits. Question 6. Which approach would be most appropriate for a VMware cloud professional when a business unit urgently requests the deployment of a new, unvetted third-party integration that bypasses standard security and compliance checks, citing critical business deadlines? Option A. Escalate the request to senior management for an immediate override of standard procedures, emphasizing the business urgency. Option B. Politely decline the request, stating that all integrations must follow the established, lengthy approval process, regardless of business urgency. Option C. Immediately approve and deploy the integration to meet the business deadline, with a plan to address security and compliance concerns post-deployment. Option D. Initiate a rapid but thorough risk assessment involving security and compliance teams, documenting any temporary deviations and mitigation strategies, and communicating potential delays to the business unit. The correct answer is C. Immediately approve and deploy the integration to meet the business deadline, with a plan to address security and compliance concerns post-deployment. Explanation. The scenario presents a common challenge in cloud professional roles, balancing the immediate need for a new feature with the potential long-term implications of technical debt and security vulnerabilities. The professional must make a decision that aligns with both business objectives and the established regulatory framework for VMware Cloud Professional Services, which in this context is assumed to be governed by a hypothetical but representative set of industry best practices and compliance standards applicable to cloud service providers. The challenge lies in the inherent tension between agility and robust governance. The correct approach prioritizes a thorough risk assessment and adherence to established change management processes. This aligns with best practices for maintaining the integrity and security of a cloud environment. By involving relevant stakeholders, including security and compliance teams, and documenting the decision-making process, the professional demonstrates due diligence and accountability. This approach ensures that any deviation from standard procedures is justified, understood, and mitigated, thereby upholding the professional's responsibility to deliver secure and compliant services. This aligns with the principle of responsible innovation, where new functionalities are introduced in a controlled and evaluated manner. An incorrect approach that bypasses established security reviews and documentation introduces significant regulatory and ethical risks. Failing to involve security and compliance teams means potential vulnerabilities might be overlooked, leading to breaches that could violate data protection regulations and service-level agreements. This also creates a precedent for circumventing controls, undermining the overall security posture and potentially leading to audit failures. Another incorrect approach, focusing solely on the immediate business demand without considering the technical implications, can lead to the accumulation of technical debt. This debt can manifest as increased operational costs, reduced system stability, and a higher likelihood of future security incidents, all of which are detrimental to the long-term viability and trustworthiness of the cloud service. A third incorrect approach, delaying the decision indefinitely due to analysis paralysis, fails to meet business needs and can lead to missed opportunities, impacting the organization's competitive standing and potentially violating contractual obligations to clients. Professionals should employ a structured decision-making framework that includes clearly defining the problem and objectives, gathering relevant information, including technical, business, and compliance requirements, identifying and evaluating potential solutions and their associated risks, consulting with relevant stakeholders, making a documented decision, and implementing and monitoring the chosen course of action. This systematic process ensures that decisions are informed, defensible, and aligned with professional responsibilities and regulatory expectations. Question 7. The review process indicates that the organization's current approach to assessing risks within its VMware cloud environment primarily focuses on identifying known software vulnerabilities in the hypervisor layer, with limited consideration for the impact of these vulnerabilities on specific business applications or the likelihood of exploitation in the context of the organization's unique deployment. Which of the following approaches best aligns with professional best practices for risk assessment in a VMware Cloud professional context? Option A. Prioritize risk mitigation efforts based solely on the severity score of identified technical vulnerabilities, without conducting a separate analysis of business impact or the specific threat landscape relevant to the organization. Option B. Implement a comprehensive risk assessment framework that systematically identifies threats and vulnerabilities across the entire VMware Cloud stack, analyzes their potential business impact and likelihood of exploitation, and prioritizes mitigation efforts based on residual risk. Option C. Rely on automated vulnerability scanning tools to continuously identify and report on all potential security weaknesses within the VMware Cloud infrastructure, assuming that addressing all reported vulnerabilities will adequately mitigate risk. Option D. Conduct a periodic, high-level review of the VMware Cloud architecture, focusing on compliance with vendor-provided baseline configurations, and assume that adherence to these standards inherently manages all significant risks. Correct answer is B. Implement a comprehensive risk assessment framework that systematically identifies threats and vulnerabilities across the entire VMware Cloud stack, analyzes their potential business impact and likelihood of exploitation, and prioritizes mitigation efforts based on residual risk. Explanation. The review process indicates a potential gap in the organization's risk assessment methodology for its VMware Cloud environment. This scenario is professionally challenging because a robust risk assessment is foundational to ensuring the security, compliance, and operational integrity of cloud services. The complexity of VMware Cloud, with its interconnected components and shared responsibility models, necessitates a systematic and thorough approach to identifying, analyzing, and mitigating risks. Failure to do so can lead to significant security breaches, data loss, regulatory non-compliance, and reputational damage. The correct approach, which involves a comprehensive risk assessment that considers both technical vulnerabilities and business impact, represents best professional practice. This aligns with general IT governance principles and is implicitly supported by regulatory frameworks that mandate risk management for IT systems. Specifically, for a VMware Cloud professional, this means understanding the shared responsibility model and assessing risks across the customer's responsibility domain, e.g., guest OS, applications, data, and the cloud provider's responsibility domain, e.g., underlying infrastructure, hypervisor. A thorough assessment would involve identifying threats, vulnerabilities, likelihood of occurrence, and potential impact, leading to the development of appropriate controls. An incorrect approach, such as focusing solely on technical vulnerabilities without considering business impact, is professionally unacceptable. This failure neglects the core purpose of risk management, which is to protect business objectives. Regulatory frameworks often require that risk assessments prioritize based on business criticality. Another incorrect approach, such as relying exclusively on vendor-provided security assessments without independent validation, is also professionally flawed. While vendor assessments are valuable, they may not fully capture the unique configuration and usage patterns of the organization's specific VMware Cloud deployment. This can lead to a false sense of security and leave critical risks unaddressed, potentially violating the principle of due diligence required by many compliance standards. A third incorrect approach, performing a one-time risk assessment and failing to establish a continuous monitoring and reassessment process, is also professionally deficient. The dynamic nature of cloud environments, with frequent updates, configuration changes, and evolving threat landscapes, demands ongoing risk management. The professional reasoning framework for this situation involves a structured, iterative process. First, clearly define the scope of the VMware Cloud environment and its critical assets. Second, identify potential threats and vulnerabilities relevant to the specific VMware Cloud services being utilized. Third, analyze the likelihood and impact of these risks, considering both technical and business perspectives. Fourth, evaluate existing controls and determine the residual risk. Fifth, develop and implement appropriate risk mitigation strategies, prioritizing based on impact and likelihood. Finally, establish a schedule for regular review and reassessment of risks to ensure ongoing effectiveness of controls and adaptation to changes. Question 8. The analysis reveals that a client is eager to migrate their sensitive financial data to a VMware cloud environment to leverage scalability and cost efficiencies. However, they have expressed a strong desire to expedite the migration process, potentially overlooking detailed security and compliance validation steps to meet aggressive go-live deadlines. Which of the following approaches best aligns with the professional responsibilities of a VMware cloud professional in this scenario? Option A. Conduct a comprehensive risk assessment and develop a phased migration plan that integrates security and compliance controls at each stage, ensuring alignment with all applicable regulatory requirements before proceeding with full data migration. Option B. Implement a generic set of cloud security best practices without a specific assessment of the client's unique regulatory obligations or the VMware cloud environment's specific security posture. Option C. Immediately initiate the data migration process to meet the client's deadline, with a plan to address security and compliance concerns post-migration once the system is operational. Option D. Prioritize cost optimization during the migration planning phase, assuming that standard cloud security features will adequately protect the sensitive financial data. The correct answer is A. Conduct a comprehensive risk assessment and develop a phased migration plan that integrates security and compliance controls at each stage, ensuring alignment with all applicable regulatory requirements before proceeding with full data migration. Explanation. The analysis reveals a common challenge in cloud professional engagements, balancing the benefits of rapid deployment with the imperative of robust security and compliance. The scenario is professionally challenging because the client's desire for speed can create pressure to bypass or inadequately implement critical security controls, potentially leading to regulatory noncompliance and significant business risk. Careful judgment is required to ensure that the VMware Cloud professional's recommendations align with both the client's business objectives and the stringent regulatory framework governing their industry. The correct approach represents best professional practice because it prioritizes a comprehensive risk assessment and a phased implementation strategy. This ensures that security and compliance are not afterthoughts, but are integrated into the design and deployment from the outset. Adhering to the VMware Cloud professional's responsibilities under the relevant regulatory framework, which, for this exam, is assumed to be a specific, unstated jurisdictions framework that mandates data protection and secure cloud operations, means proactively identifying and mitigating risks. This demonstrates due diligence and a commitment to client security and regulatory adherence, thereby safeguarding the client's data and reputation. An incorrect approach that suggests immediate migration without a thorough security review fails to meet the professional obligation to protect client data and ensure compliance. This bypasses essential risk mitigation steps, potentially exposing the client to breaches and regulatory penalties. Another incorrect approach, which focuses solely on cost optimization without considering security implications, is also professionally unacceptable. It neglects the fundamental duty to provide secure and compliant solutions, prioritizing short-term financial gains over long-term security and regulatory standing. A third incorrect approach, which relies on generic security best practices without tailoring them to the specific VMware cloud environment and the client's regulatory obligations, is insufficient. It lacks the specificity required to address the unique threat landscape and compliance requirements of the client's deployment, leading to potential gaps in security and compliance. Professionals should employ a decision-making framework that begins with understanding the client's business objectives and regulatory landscape. This is followed by a thorough risk assessment, the development of a security and compliance strategy aligned with the identified risks and regulations, and a phased implementation plan that incorporates continuous monitoring and validation. This structured approach ensures that all critical aspects are addressed systematically, leading to a secure, compliant, and effective VMware cloud solution. Question 9. The evaluation methodology shows a proposed VMware cloud solution that offers significant cost efficiencies and rapid deployment capabilities. However, the client operates in a highly regulated industry with strict data residency requirements. Which of the following actions best demonstrates adherence to professional responsibility and regulatory compliance in this scenario? Option A. Conduct a comprehensive assessment of the client's specific data residency and privacy obligations. Engage with legal and compliance teams to validate the chosen VMware cloud services and configurations against these requirements, and document all findings and mitigation strategies before finalizing the solution design. Option B. Prioritize the rapid deployment aspect of the solution, deferring detailed data residency checks until after the initial go-live to minimize project delays. Option C. Proceed with the most cost-effective VMware cloud configuration, assuming standard compliance controls are sufficient, and address any potential data residency issues post-deployment if they arise. Option D. Select VMware cloud services based solely on their technical performance metrics, with the understanding that the client is responsible for ensuring their own regulatory compliance. The correct answer is C. Proceed with the most cost-effective VMware cloud configuration, assuming standard compliance controls are sufficient, and address any potential data residency issues post-deployment if they arise. Explanation. The evaluation methodology shows a critical juncture in a VMware cloud professional's career, managing stakeholder expectations and ensuring compliance within a regulated environment. The challenge lies in balancing the technical feasibility and cost-effectiveness of a proposed VMware cloud solution with the stringent data residency and privacy requirements mandated by the relevant regulatory framework. Professionals must navigate potential conflicts between business objectives, e.g., rapid deployment, cost reduction, and legal obligations, ensuring that any solution adheres strictly to the specified jurisdiction's laws. The correct approach prioritizes a thorough understanding and explicit documentation of all applicable regulatory requirements before proceeding with solution design. This involves proactive engagement with legal and compliance teams, conducting detailed data residency assessments, and ensuring that the chosen VMware cloud services and configurations demonstrably meet these obligations. This represents best professional practice because it embeds compliance from the outset, mitigating significant legal, financial, and reputational risks. It aligns with the ethical duty of care to protect sensitive data and uphold regulatory standards, preventing potential breaches and penalties. An incorrect approach would be to assume that standard VMware cloud offerings inherently satisfy all regulatory needs without specific verification. This overlooks the nuanced nature of data residency laws, which can vary based on data type, processing activities, and customer location. Such an assumption could lead to non-compliance, exposing the organization to regulatory fines, loss of customer trust, and potential legal action. Another incorrect approach is to defer the compliance assessment to a later stage, such as post-deployment. This reactive stance is highly risky, as it may necessitate costly and disruptive remediation efforts if non-compliance is discovered, potentially jeopardizing the entire project and damaging the professional's credibility. Finally, prioritizing cost savings over compliance, even if technically feasible, is a direct violation of professional ethics and regulatory mandates, as it knowingly exposes the organization to unacceptable risks. Professionals should adopt a risk-based decision-making framework. This involves 1. Identifying all relevant regulatory obligations. 2. Assessing the impact of these obligations on the proposed VMware cloud solution. 3. Designing the solution to meet these requirements proactively. 4. Documenting all compliance-related decisions and justifications. 5. Seeking validation from legal and compliance experts throughout the process. Question 10. The efficiency study reveals that a significant portion of the VMware cloud infrastructure is operating at suboptimal resource utilization levels, leading to increased operational costs. As a VMware cloud professional, what is the most appropriate course of action to address this finding while ensuring continued service delivery and adherence to best practices? Option A. Immediately implement a broad-scale reduction in compute and storage resources across all VMware cloud services to achieve immediate cost savings, irrespective of individual workload demands. Option B. Propose a migration to a less feature-rich, lower-cost VMware cloud service tier without a thorough assessment of the impact on existing application functionality and performance. Option C. Initiate a project to re-architect the entire VMware cloud environment to a completely different cloud platform to bypass the current cost inefficiencies, without evaluating the feasibility or long-term implications. Option D. Conduct a detailed analysis of resource utilization patterns. Identify specific areas of over-provisioning or underutilization, and propose targeted right-sizing and optimization strategies based on workload requirements and VMware's recommended configurations. The correct answer is D. Conduct a detailed analysis of resource utilization patterns, identify specific areas of overprovisioning or underutilization, and propose targeted right-sizing and optimization strategies based on workload requirements and VMware's recommended configurations. Explanation: scenario analysis. The scenario presents a common challenge in cloud professional roles, balancing the immediate need for cost optimization with the long-term strategic goals and the potential impact on service delivery and stakeholder trust. The efficiency study highlights a discrepancy between perceived value and actual expenditure, requiring a nuanced approach that considers technical feasibility, business impact, and adherence to VMware's best practices and licensing agreements. The challenge lies in identifying the root cause of the inefficiency and proposing solutions that are both technically sound and strategically aligned, without compromising service levels or violating contractual obligations. Correct approach analysis. The correct approach involves a thorough investigation into the root causes of the identified inefficiencies. This includes analyzing resource utilization patterns, identifying underutilized or overprovisioned resources, and examining the configuration and licensing models of VMware cloud services. The professional must then propose solutions that address these specific issues, such as right-sizing resources, optimizing storage tiers, or reevaluating licensing based on actual usage. This aligns with the professional responsibility to ensure efficient and cost-effective operation of VMware cloud environments, as mandated by VMware's professional conduct guidelines, and the implicit expectation of delivering value to the organization. It demonstrates a commitment to continuous improvement and responsible resource management, which are core tenets of professional cloud management. Incorrect approaches analysis. One incorrect approach would be to immediately recommend a blanket reduction in resource allocation across all services without a detailed analysis. This fails to consider the varying needs of different workloads and could lead to performance degradation, service outages, and a breach of service level agreements, SLAs, which is a significant professional and ethical failure. It also ignores the potential for legitimate, high-demand usage that might appear inefficient in a superficial study. Another incorrect approach would be to focus solely on the cheapest available licensing options, without considering the feature sets or support levels required for critical business operations. This could lead to a reduction in essential functionality or support, jeopardizing business continuity and demonstrating a lack of understanding of the organization's overall strategic objectives. This approach prioritizes cost over operational integrity, a clear ethical lapse. A third incorrect approach would be to implement a solution that requires significant architectural changes without proper stakeholder consultation or a phased rollout plan. This could disrupt ongoing operations, lead to unexpected costs, and erode stakeholder confidence. It demonstrates poor project management and a disregard for the impact on business operations and user experience, which are critical professional considerations. Professional reasoning. Professionals in this role must adopt a data-driven and holistic approach. The decision-making process should involve 1. Deeply understanding the findings of the efficiency study and the underlying data. 2. Conducting a comprehensive technical and business impact assessment of potential solutions. 3. Consulting with relevant stakeholders to gather requirements and manage expectations. 4. Evaluating solutions against VMware's best practices, licensing terms, and the organization's strategic goals. 5. Developing a phased implementation plan with clear metrics for success and risk mitigation strategies. This systematic process ensures that decisions are informed, responsible, and aligned with professional obligations and organizational objectives. Question 11. During the evaluation of a new VMware Cloud Foundation deployment for a financial services client operating under strict data residency regulations, the technical team proposes leveraging a global cloud providers' readily available services for rapid deployment. However, the client's internal compliance officer has raised concerns about potential data sovereignty issues, as the provider's standard service offerings may not guarantee data storage within the specified jurisdiction. The project manager needs to decide on the most appropriate next step to ensure compliance. Option A. Proceed with the deployment using the readily available services, assuming the cloud provider's general compliance statements are sufficient, and address any potential data residency issues post-deployment if they arise. Option B. Engage with the cloud provider to obtain explicit contractual guarantees and certifications, confirming that the selected VMware Cloud Foundation services and underlying infrastructure will store and process all client data exclusively within the defined regulatory jurisdiction. Option C. Implement a data anonymization strategy for all sensitive client data before it is ingested into the VMware Cloud Foundation environment, thereby circumventing the need for strict data residency guarantees. Option D. Advise the client to migrate their operations to a different cloud provider that explicitly advertises services tailored for the specific jurisdiction, even if it means a longer deployment timeline and potentially higher costs. Correct answer is B. Engage with the cloud provider to obtain explicit contractual guarantees and certifications, confirming that the selected VMware Cloud Foundation services and underlying infrastructure will store and process all client data exclusively within the defined regulatory jurisdiction. Explanation. This scenario presents a common challenge in cloud professional roles, balancing the immediate need for a functional solution with the long-term implications of architectural choices, particularly concerning data residency and compliance. The professional must navigate the complexities of a multi-cloud strategy while adhering to the specific regulatory framework governing the exam's jurisdiction. The challenge lies in understanding how different cloud service providers and their service offerings align with these regulations, especially when dealing with sensitive data. Correct approach demonstrates best professional practice by prioritizing a thorough understanding of the regulatory landscape and its direct impact on cloud architecture. It involves proactively identifying and selecting cloud services that are certified or demonstrably compliant with the relevant data residency and privacy laws. This ensures that the deployed solution not only meets functional requirements, but also operates within legal and ethical boundaries, mitigating risks of non-compliance, data breaches, and reputational damage. This aligns with the core principles of responsible cloud adoption and professional integrity expected within the VMware Cloud professional domain. An incorrect approach that overlooks the regulatory framework and focuses solely on technical feasibility or cost-effectiveness is professionally unacceptable. Such an approach risks violating data protection laws, leading to significant fines, legal repercussions, and loss of client trust. For instance, deploying services in regions that do not meet data residency requirements or utilizing services with inadequate security certifications would constitute a direct breach of regulatory obligations. Another incorrect approach might involve making assumptions about a cloud provider's compliance without seeking explicit verification, which is a failure of due diligence and professional responsibility. The professional decision-making process in such situations should involve a structured risk assessment. This begins with clearly defining the regulatory requirements applicable to the data and the client's operations. Subsequently, it involves evaluating potential cloud solutions against these requirements, seeking explicit confirmation of compliance from providers, and documenting all decisions and justifications. Collaboration with legal and compliance teams is crucial to ensure a comprehensive understanding and adherence to all mandates. Question 12. The efficiency study reveals that several virtual machines within the VMware cloud environment are reporting significantly low resource utilization over extended periods. A proposal is put forth to immediately decommission these low utilization virtual machines to reduce operational costs and improve overall resource allocation efficiency. Considering the regulatory framework for VMware Cloud Professional Services, which of the following actions best represents a professionally responsible and compliant approach? Option A. Immediately decommission all virtual machines identified as having low utilization to realize immediate cost savings and free up resources for more critical workloads. Option B. Proceed with decommissioning based solely on the efficiency study's findings, assuming that low utilization inherently means the virtual machines are no longer essential. Option C. Reallocate the resources from low utilization virtual machines to new projects without verifying the compatibility and security implications for the new workloads. Option D. Conduct a detailed impact assessment to identify the purpose of each low-utilization virtual machine, including any dependencies, data retention requirements, or compliance obligations, before any decommissioning is considered. The correct answer is D. Conduct a detailed impact assessment to identify the purpose of each low-utilization virtual machine, including any dependencies, data retention requirements, or compliance obligations, before any decommissioning is considered. Explanation: this scenario presents a professional challenge due to the inherent tension between optimizing resource utilization for cost savings and ensuring the integrity and compliance of the VMware cloud environment. The efficiency study highlights potential areas for improvement, but the proposed actions carry risks that must be carefully evaluated against the regulatory framework governing VMware Cloud professional services. The core of the challenge lies in balancing operational efficiency with adherence to established best practices and potential regulatory mandates related to data integrity, service availability, and security within the cloud infrastructure. The correct approach represents best professional practice because it prioritizes a thorough, risk-based assessment aligned with the VMware Cloud professional regulatory framework. This involves understanding the specific implications of any proposed changes on compliance, security, and service continuity. By engaging stakeholders, documenting the rationale, and implementing changes in a controlled manner with rollback plans, professionals demonstrate due diligence and a commitment to maintaining a secure and compliant environment. This aligns with the overarching principles of responsible cloud management and adherence to industry standards and potential regulatory requirements that underpin the VMware Cloud professional certification. An incorrect approach that involves immediately decommissioning unused virtual machines without a comprehensive impact analysis fails to consider the potential for these resources to be critical for disaster recovery, historical data retention, or compliance auditing purposes. This oversight could lead to regulatory violations if data retention policies are breached or if the ability to respond to audit requests is compromised. Another incorrect approach, which is to reallocate resources without verifying the compatibility and security implications for the new workloads, risks introducing vulnerabilities or performance degradation, potentially violating service-level agreements and security best practices mandated by the regulatory framework. Finally, implementing changes based solely on cost reduction, without considering the operational and compliance impact, ignores the fundamental responsibility of a VMware Cloud professional to maintain a stable, secure, and compliant infrastructure. This reactive, cost-driven decision-making process is a direct contravention of professional duties and regulatory expectations. The professional decision-making process for similar situations should involve a structured, risk-aware methodology. This begins with a clear understanding of the stated objective, e.g., efficiency improvement. Next, a comprehensive assessment of the potential impact of any proposed solution on security, compliance, performance, and availability must be conducted, referencing the specific regulatory framework applicable to VMware Cloud professional services. This assessment should involve consultation with relevant stakeholders. Based on this analysis, a decision should be made, prioritizing solutions that offer the best balance of efficiency gains and risk mitigation. Implementation should be phased, well-documented, and include robust testing and rollback procedures. Continuous monitoring and review are essential to ensure ongoing compliance and operational effectiveness. Question 13. Process analysis reveals that the current VMware Cloud deployment is experiencing significant manual effort in resource provisioning and deprovisioning, leading to extended lead times and potential for human error. To address this, a proposal has been made to implement a fully automated workflow for these processes, aiming to reduce operational overhead and improve speed. However, the proposed automation solution has not undergone a formal security review or a comprehensive assessment against the specific compliance requirements for VMware Cloud professional environments. Which of the following represents the most professionally responsible approach to this situation? Option A. Halt the implementation of the automated workflow and conduct a thorough security and compliance assessment, including a risk analysis of the proposed automation's impact on data integrity and access controls, before proceeding. Option B. Implement the automated workflow with a phased rollout, focusing initially on non-critical resources, and monitor for any immediate security or compliance deviations. Option C. Proceed with the implementation of the automated workflow immediately to realize the efficiency gains, and address any potential security or compliance issues in a subsequent review. Option D. Delegate the security and compliance review to the IT operations team. as they are most familiar with the day-to-day operations of the VMware cloud environment. The correct answer is C. Proceed with the implementation of the automated workflow immediately to realize the efficiency gains and address any potential security or compliance issues in a subsequent review. Explanation. This scenario presents a common challenge in cloud professional roles, balancing the drive for efficiency with the imperative to maintain robust security and compliance. The professional must navigate the complexities of a rapidly evolving VMware cloud environment, where technical advancements can introduce new vulnerabilities or compliance gaps if not managed meticulously. The challenge lies in identifying and implementing process optimizations that demonstrably improve operational efficiency without compromising the integrity of the deployed cloud infrastructure or violating the specific regulatory framework governing VMware cloud professional practices. The correct approach involves a systematic, risk-based methodology that prioritizes security and compliance throughout the optimization process. This aligns with best professional practice by ensuring that any changes are thoroughly vetted for their impact on the security posture and adherence to relevant VMware cloud professional guidelines. Specifically, it emphasizes a proactive stance, integrating security and compliance checks at every stage of process analysis and implementation, thereby minimizing the likelihood of introducing new risks or violating established protocols. This approach is ethically sound as it upholds the duty of care to protect client data and infrastructure. An incorrect approach that focuses solely on cost reduction without a commensurate security and compliance review is professionally unacceptable. This would represent a failure to adhere to the core principles of responsible cloud management and could lead to significant regulatory breaches, data compromise, and reputational damage. For instance, implementing automation that bypasses existing security controls or reduces the frequency of compliance audits would directly contravene the spirit and letter of regulatory frameworks that mandate continuous monitoring and adherence to security best practices. Another incorrect approach, such as adopting new technologies without a thorough understanding of their integration with existing compliance frameworks, risks introducing unknown vulnerabilities and non-compliance issues, demonstrating a lack of due diligence. The professional decision-making process should involve a structured approach. First, clearly define the optimization objectives, ensuring they are aligned with both efficiency gains and compliance requirements. Second, conduct a comprehensive risk assessment for each proposed optimization, evaluating potential impacts on security, data privacy, and regulatory adherence. Third, prioritize optimizations based on a combination of potential efficiency benefits and the severity of associated risks. Fourth, implement changes in a controlled manner, with robust testing and validation against compliance benchmarks. Finally, establish ongoing monitoring and review mechanisms to ensure sustained compliance and identify further optimization opportunities. Question 14. Regulatory review indicates that a multinational organization is deploying a VMware cloud solution to host sensitive customer data for clients across the European Union and North America. The organization needs to ensure that customer data remains within the geographical boundaries stipulated by GDPR for EU data and relevant U.S. state privacy laws for North American data. Which of the following approaches best ensures compliance with these data residency requirements within the VMware Cloud Professional Framework? Option A. Configure the VMware Cloud environment to deploy virtual machines and store data exclusively within specific geographical regions that align with the data residency mandates of both the European Union and North America, and implement strict access controls to prevent data migration outside these designated zones. Option B. Rely on customer assurances that they will manage their data residency compliance without implementing specific technical controls within the VMware cloud environment to enforce data location. Option C. Assume that the standard global VMware cloud infrastructure inherently satisfies data residency requirements, as it is designed for broad accessibility. Option D. Implement data residency controls only after a customer reports a potential compliance issue related to data location. The correct answer is A. Configure the VMware cloud environment to deploy virtual machines and store data exclusively within specific geographical regions that align with the data residency mandates of both the European Union and North America, and implement strict access controls to prevent data migration outside these designated zones. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario presents a professional challenge related to data residency and compliance within the VMware Cloud professional context, specifically concerning the handling of sensitive customer data. The core difficulty lies in balancing the operational benefits of a global cloud infrastructure with the stringent regulatory requirements of data localization. Organizations must ensure that data processed and stored within VMware Cloud environments adheres to the specific legal and regulatory mandates of the jurisdictions where their customers operate, which can vary significantly. This requires a deep understanding of both VMware's capabilities and the applicable legal frameworks, demanding careful planning and ongoing vigilance. Correct approach analysis. The correct approach involves a proactive and documented strategy for data residency management. This means identifying the specific regulatory requirements for data localization in all relevant customer jurisdictions, and then configuring the VMware Cloud environment to ensure data is stored and processed within those designated geographical boundaries. This includes leveraging VMware's features for regional deployment, data replication policies, and access controls. This approach represents best professional practice because it directly addresses the regulatory obligations, minimizes the risk of non-compliance, and builds customer trust by demonstrating a commitment to data privacy and security. It aligns with the principle of privacy by design and ensures that the cloud solution is architected with compliance as a foundational element. Incorrect approach is analysis. An incorrect approach would be to assume that a standard global VMware Cloud deployment automatically satisfies all data residency requirements. This fails to acknowledge the diversity of international regulations and the potential for data to be processed or stored outside of permitted regions. This approach carries significant regulatory and ethical risks, including potential fines, legal action, and reputational damage due to noncompliance. Another incorrect approach is to rely solely on customer self-attestation regarding their data residency needs without independent verification or technical enforcement within the VMware Cloud environment. While customer input is valuable, it does not absolve the service provider of their responsibility to ensure compliance. This can lead to inadvertent breaches of data residency laws if customers misunderstand or misrepresent their requirements, or if the provider's infrastructure does not adequately support those requirements. A third incorrect approach is to implement data residency controls only after a compliance issue has been identified. This reactive stance is insufficient and demonstrates a lack of due diligence. It exposes the organization to significant risks during the period of noncompliance and suggests a failure to prioritize regulatory adherence in the initial design and ongoing management of the cloud service. Professional reasoning. Professionals should adopt a framework that prioritizes understanding regulatory landscapes, architecting solutions with compliance built in, and maintaining continuous monitoring. This involves 1. Regulatory assessment, thoroughly researching and documenting all applicable data residency laws and regulations for the target customer base. 2. Solution design, configuring VMware Cloud services to align with identified data residency requirements, utilizing features for regional control and data governance. 3. Documentation and auditing, maintaining clear records of data residency configurations and conducting regular audits to ensure ongoing compliance. 4. Customer engagement, collaborating with customers to understand their specific data residency needs and ensuring the deployed solution meets those needs. 5. Risk management, proactively identifying and mitigating potential compliance risks related to data location and processing. Question 15. The assessment process reveals that a critical business application requires immediate deployment to a VMware Cloud environment. The proposed deployment plan includes several third-party integrations and custom configurations that have not undergone a full security baseline review, though a preliminary check suggests they are generally compliant. The project manager is pushing for immediate deployment to meet a hard deadline, emphasizing that security remediation can be addressed post-deployment. Which of the following approaches best aligns with the responsibilities of a VMware Cloud professional in this scenario? Option A. Deploy the solution immediately and then initiate a security remediation plan to address any vulnerabilities discovered during the initial operational phase. Option B. Implement the solution with only a superficial check of the security configuration, assuming the third-party integrations are secure by default, and address any identified issues later. Option C. Proceed with the deployment as planned, prioritizing the business deadline, and schedule a comprehensive security review for the subsequent week. Option D. Conduct a thorough security and compliance review of all proposed configurations and integrations against the established security baseline and relevant VMware Cloud professional guidelines before proceeding with the deployment. Correct answer is D. Conduct a thorough security and compliance review of all proposed configurations and integrations against the established security baseline and relevant VMware Cloud professional guidelines before proceeding with the deployment. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario presents a common challenge in cloud professional roles, balancing the immediate need for rapid deployment with the long-term implications of security and compliance. The pressure to deliver a functional environment quickly can lead to shortcuts that compromise adherence to established security policies and regulatory requirements. The professional must exercise sound judgment to identify and mitigate these risks without unduly delaying critical business operations. The challenge lies in understanding the specific VMware Cloud professional responsibilities within the defined regulatory framework and applying them to a practical, albeit hypothetical, situation. Correct approach analysis. The correct approach involves a thorough review of the proposed solution against the established security baseline and relevant VMware Cloud professional guidelines. This ensures that all deployed components meet the required security posture and comply with any applicable regulations. By prioritizing security and compliance checks before full deployment, the professional upholds their responsibility to protect the organization's data and infrastructure, aligning with best practices for secure cloud adoption and demonstrating due diligence. This proactive stance prevents potential breaches and regulatory penalties, which is a core tenet of professional conduct in this domain. Incorrect approaches analysis. Proceeding with deployment without a comprehensive security review is a direct violation of due diligence and potentially regulatory mandates. This approach prioritizes speed over security, creating vulnerabilities that could be exploited. It demonstrates a failure to adhere to established security policies and a disregard for the potential consequences of a security incident. Implementing the solution with only a superficial check of the security configuration, without validating against the full baseline, is insufficient. This approach creates a false sense of security and leaves the environment susceptible to misconfigurations or overlooked vulnerabilities. It fails to meet the professional standard of thoroughness required for secure cloud deployments. Deploying the solution and then planning to address security concerns in a later phase is a reactive and high-risk strategy. This approach introduces significant security gaps during the critical initial deployment period. It indicates a lack of foresight and a failure to integrate security into the deployment lifecycle, which is a fundamental requirement for responsible cloud management, and a potential breach of regulatory compliance if specific security controls are mandated from the outset. Professional reasoning. Professionals in this role must adopt a risk-based approach, integrating security and compliance considerations into every stage of the cloud lifecycle. This involves understanding the specific regulatory landscape applicable to their organization and the VMware Cloud professional responsibilities within that framework. A structured decision-making process should include 1. Identifying all relevant security and compliance requirements. 2. Assessing the proposed solution against these requirements. 3. Implementing necessary controls and configurations. 4. Validating the effectiveness of these controls through testing and review. And 5. Establishing ongoing monitoring and management processes. When faced with pressure to accelerate deployment, professionals must clearly articulate the risks associated with bypassing security and compliance steps and advocate for a balanced approach that meets both business and security objectives. Question 16. The efficiency study reveals a significant underutilization of compute resources within specific VMware Cloud Foundation (VCF) management domain clusters, leading to increased operational expenditure. Which of the following investigative approaches best aligns with professional best practices for identifying the root cause of this inefficiency? Option A. Focus solely on optimizing the network configuration of the management domain, assuming that network latency is the primary driver of compute resource underutilization. Option B. Immediately initiate a project to consolidate management domain clusters by reducing the number of hosts, assuming that fewer hosts will inherently lead to better resource utilization. Option C. Conduct a comprehensive review of workload placement policies and resource allocation across all vSphere clusters, correlating VM resource requests with actual consumption and identifying any persistent overprovisioning or idle resources. Option D. Implement a blanket policy to reduce the CPU and memory reservations for all virtual machines within the management domain, aiming to free up perceived idle capacity. Correct answer is C. Conduct a comprehensive review of workload placement policies and resource allocation across all vSphere clusters, correlating VM resource requests with actual consumption and identifying any persistent overprovisioning or idle resources. Explanation. The efficiency study reveals a significant disparity in resource utilization across different VMware Cloud Foundation (VCF) deployments managed by a single organization. This scenario is professionally challenging because it requires a deep understanding of VCF architecture, operational best practices, and the ability to identify root causes of inefficiency without disrupting ongoing operations or compromising security. The pressure to optimize costs while maintaining performance and compliance necessitates a nuanced approach. The correct approach involves a systematic, data-driven analysis of the VCF environment, focusing on identifying specific components or configurations contributing to the observed inefficiencies. This includes examining workload placement, network traffic patterns, storage I/O, and the underlying infrastructure's capacity. Best professional practice dictates a phased approach, starting with non-intrusive monitoring and gradually moving to more targeted investigations. This aligns with the principles of responsible IT management, ensuring that changes are well understood and their impact is predictable. Adherence to VMware's recommended best practices for VCF deployment and operation, as outlined in official documentation and training, is paramount. This ensures that the chosen solutions are technically sound and supported, minimizing the risk of introducing new problems or violating service-level agreements. An incorrect approach would be to implement broad, sweeping changes without a clear understanding of the underlying issues. For instance, indiscriminately resizing virtual machines or reconfiguring network segments without correlating these actions to the efficiency study's findings could lead to performance degradation, increased costs, or security vulnerabilities. Such actions would represent a failure to adhere to due diligence and a disregard for the potential impact on business operations. Another incorrect approach would be to prioritize cost reduction over performance or stability. While efficiency is important, compromising the integrity or responsiveness of the VCF environment to achieve short-term savings is professionally unsound and ethically questionable, as it fails to uphold the organization's commitment to providing reliable services. Furthermore, ignoring potential security implications when making changes, such as altering firewall rules or access controls without proper risk assessment, constitutes a significant regulatory and ethical failure, potentially exposing the organization to breaches and non-compliance. Professionals should employ a decision-making framework that prioritizes understanding before action. This involves 1. Thoroughly analyzing the efficiency study's data to pinpoint the most probable causes of inefficiency. 2. Developing a hypothesis for each identified cause. 3. Designing targeted experiments or investigations to validate or refute these hypotheses, starting with the least disruptive methods. 4. Evaluating potential solutions based on their effectiveness, cost, risk, and alignment with organizational goals and regulatory requirements. 5. Implementing changes incrementally, with robust monitoring and rollback plans in place. 6. Documenting all findings, decisions, and implemented changes for future reference and auditing. Question 17. Implementation of a new VMware cloud solution for a financial services firm handling sensitive customer financial data requires a thorough understanding of regulatory compliance. The firm is based in a jurisdiction with strict data residency and privacy laws similar to those governing GDPR. Which of the following approaches best ensures adherence to these regulations during the migration and ongoing operation of the VMware cloud environment? Option A. Prioritize cost savings and speed of deployment, relying on the provider's general reputation for security without specific verification of compliance with the firm's unique regulatory obligations. Option B. Obtain written assurances from the VMware cloud provider that their infrastructure is compliant with all relevant data protection regulations and proceed with data migration. Option C. Assume that the VMware cloud provider's standard service level agreements, SLAs, implicitly cover all regulatory compliance requirements for customer data. Option D. Conduct a detailed audit of the VMware cloud provider's compliance certifications, data handling policies, and security controls, and establish a clear understanding of the shared responsibility model for compliance, documenting these findings and agreements. The correct answer is B. Obtain written assurances from the VMware cloud provider that their infrastructure is compliant with all relevant data protection regulations and proceed with data migration. Explanation. The scenario presents a common challenge in cloud environments, ensuring regulatory compliance when migrating sensitive data to a VMware cloud solution. The core difficulty lies in balancing the benefits of cloud adoption with the stringent data protection and privacy requirements mandated by relevant regulations. Professionals must meticulously assess the chosen VMware cloud provider's compliance posture against the specific regulatory framework applicable to the data being handled. This requires a deep understanding of both the VMware cloud architecture and the nuances of the regulatory landscape. The correct approach involves a proactive and thorough due diligence process. This includes verifying the VMware cloud provider's certifications and attestations against the specific regulatory requirements, e.g., GDPR, HIPAA, PCI DSS, depending on the jurisdiction and data type. It also necessitates understanding the shared responsibility model, clearly defining which compliance obligations rest with the customer and which are handled by the cloud provider. Documenting this assessment and establishing clear contractual agreements that reflect these responsibilities is paramount. This represents best professional practice because it directly addresses the regulatory mandate to protect sensitive data and avoid non-compliance penalties. It demonstrates a commitment to due diligence and risk management, which are fundamental ethical and professional obligations. Incorrect approaches fail to adequately address the regulatory obligations. One incorrect approach might be to assume that because a provider offers a cloud solution, it automatically meets all regulatory requirements. This is a critical failure as it ignores the need for specific, verifiable compliance evidence tailored to the applicable regulations. It can lead to significant legal and financial repercussions, including fines and reputational damage, due to breaches of data protection laws. Another incorrect approach could be to overlook the shared responsibility model, leading to gaps in security and compliance controls where neither the provider nor the customer has taken ownership. This can result in vulnerabilities that expose sensitive data to unauthorized access or disclosure, violating privacy regulations. A third incorrect approach might be to rely solely on the provider's marketing materials without independent verification of their compliance claims. This is professionally negligent and ethically unsound, as it abdicates the responsibility to ensure data protection. The professional decision-making process should involve a structured risk assessment framework. This begins with identifying the types of data being migrated and the associated regulatory obligations. Next, a comprehensive evaluation of potential VMware cloud providers' compliance documentation, certifications, and security practices is essential. This should be followed by a clear understanding and documentation of the shared responsibility model. Finally, robust contractual agreements that explicitly outline compliance responsibilities and audit rights are crucial. This systematic approach ensures that regulatory requirements are met, risks are mitigated, and professional standards are upheld. Question 18. The assessment process reveals that a third-party vendor, engaged by a client to perform performance tuning on their VMware cloud environment, has requested direct, unfettered access to all virtual machine data to identify potential bottlenecks. The client has authorized this access verbally, but no formal security review or access control policy has been established for the vendor. As a VMware cloud professional, what is the most appropriate course of action? Option A. Implement a granular access control policy for the vendor, granting them read-only access to specific logs and performance metrics relevant to their task, and ensure all access is logged and auditable. Option B. Inform the client that this request falls outside the scope of your direct responsibilities and advise them to consult with their legal counsel regarding data access for third parties. Option C. Grant the vendor full administrative access to all virtual machines as requested by the client, assuming the client's verbal authorization is sufficient. Option D. Provide the vendor with administrative credentials for the entire VMware cloud environment, instructing them to only access the necessary data and to delete any sensitive information they encounter. The correct answer is A. Implement a granular access control policy for the vendor, granting them read-only access to specific logs and performance metrics relevant to their task, and ensure all access is logged and auditable. Explanation. This scenario presents an ethical dilemma concerning data privacy and security within a VMware cloud environment, specifically touching upon the responsibilities of a VMware Cloud Professional, VCP, under the 2V0-33. 22 exams presumed regulatory framework, which we will assume aligns with general best practices for cloud security and data protection, akin to GDPR principles for the purpose of this exercise, as no specific jurisdiction beyond the exam code is provided. The challenge lies in balancing the client's immediate business needs with the imperative to protect sensitive data from unauthorized access or disclosure, especially when a third-party vendor is involved. The correct approach prioritizes data security and compliance by ensuring that any access to sensitive data by a third-party vendor is strictly controlled, audited, and aligned with contractual obligations and data protection regulations. This involves a formal process of risk assessment, access control, and data minimization. It upholds the professional duty of care to protect client data and maintain trust. An incorrect approach that grants broad, unfettered access to sensitive data without proper vetting or controls represents a significant regulatory and ethical failure. It violates principles of data minimization and purpose limitation, potentially exposing the client to data breaches, non-compliance penalties, and reputational damage. Such an action would breach professional standards of diligence and responsibility. Another incorrect approach, which involves ignoring the request due to perceived complexity or lack of direct responsibility, is also professionally unacceptable. A VCP has a responsibility to address security concerns and facilitate secure solutions, not to abdicate their role. This inaction can lead to the client seeking insecure workarounds, further jeopardizing data. Finally, an approach that involves sharing credentials without proper authorization or logging mechanisms is a severe security and ethical lapse. This bypasses audit trails, making it impossible to track data access and accountability, and directly contravenes best practices for secure access management. Professionals should adopt a risk-based decision-making framework. This involves identifying the potential risks, understanding the regulatory and contractual obligations, evaluating the proposed solutions against these requirements, and implementing controls to mitigate identified risks. Transparency with the client and adherence to established security policies are paramount. Question 19. The monitoring system demonstrates a consistent spike in latency for virtual machine I/O operations within a specific VMware Cloud Foundation workload cluster, coinciding with the start of the daily batch processing window. This pattern has been observed for 3 consecutive business days, impacting the performance of critical financial applications hosted on this cluster. What is the most appropriate immediate next step to diagnose and address this performance degradation? Option A. Analyze performance metrics within vRealize Operations Manager for the affected cluster, correlating I/O latency with CPU, memory, and network utilization, as well as storage array performance data to identify potential bottlenecks. Option B. Advise application owners to temporarily suspend batch processing operations until the performance issue can be fully investigated and resolved, without performing any initial diagnostics. Option C. Immediately scale up the compute resources for the affected workload cluster by adding additional XC hosts, assuming that resource contention is the primary cause of the latency. Option D. Initiate a cluster-wide reboot of all XC hosts within the affected workload cluster to clear any potential transient issues that might be impacting I/O performance. The correct answer is A. Analyze performance metrics within vRealize Operations Manager for the affected cluster, correlating I/O latency with CPU, memory, and network utilization, as well as storage array performance data, to identify potential bottlenecks. Explanation. The monitoring system demonstrates a recurring pattern of performance degradation in a critical VMware Cloud Foundation, VCF, workload cluster during peak operational hours. This scenario presents a professional challenge because it directly impacts service availability and user experience, potentially leading to business disruption and reputational damage. The challenge lies in accurately diagnosing the root cause within a complex, multi-layered VCF environment, which includes compute, storage, networking, and the VCF management domain itself, while adhering to strict operational and compliance requirements. The correct approach involves a systematic, evidence-based investigation that prioritizes data integrity and compliance. This means leveraging VCF's built-in monitoring tools, e.g., vRealize Operations Manager, vCenter Alarms, and correlating performance metrics with system logs and configuration changes. The investigation must be documented thoroughly, including timestamps, observed symptoms, diagnostic steps taken, and findings. This aligns with best professional practices by ensuring transparency, accountability, and the ability to reproduce findings. Furthermore, it supports compliance with operational standards that mandate proactive performance management and incident response, ensuring that any remediation actions are well justified and do not introduce new risks. An incorrect approach would be to immediately implement broad, unverified configuration changes across the VCF environment without a clear hypothesis or supporting data. This is professionally unacceptable because it risks exacerbating the problem, causing unintended outages, and violating change management protocols. Such actions could lead to regulatory scrutiny if they result in a breach of service level agreements, SLAs, or noncompliance with internal governance policies that require controlled and tested modifications. Another incorrect approach is to dismiss the issue as transient without proper investigation, which is a failure of due diligence and proactive management. This can lead to recurring incidents and a loss of confidence in the IT infrastructure's reliability, potentially violating ethical obligations to provide a stable and performant service. Professionals should employ a structured decision-making process that begins with clearly defining the problem and its impact. This involves gathering all available data, forming hypotheses, and testing them systematically. Prioritization should be given to solutions that are least disruptive and have the highest probability of success, supported by evidence. Continuous monitoring and validation after any remediation are crucial to confirm the resolution and prevent recurrence. This methodical approach ensures that decisions are informed, defensible, and aligned with both technical best practices and organizational governance. Question 20. Investigation of how a VMware cloud professional should architect data residency and consent management for customer data within a multi-region VMware cloud deployment, considering the implications of data transfer and processing across different geographical boundaries under the relevant regulatory framework. Option A. Implement a centralized data repository in a single, compliant region and process all data there, regardless of customer origin or consent for regional processing. Option B. Design the architecture to allow for data to be stored and processed in any available VMware cloud region, relying on the cloud provider's general compliance statements without explicit customer consent for cross-border transfers. Option C. Architect the solution to enable data to be stored and processed in the customer's specified region of origin, with granular consent mechanisms for any data transfer or processing outside that region, and leverage VMware cloud security controls for data protection. Option D. Restrict all data processing and transfer to the customer's primary on-premises data center, forgoing the benefits of VMware Cloud for data that might require cross-border interaction. The correct answer is A. Implement a centralized data repository in a single, compliant region and process all data there, regardless of customer origin or consent for regional processing. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario presents a professional challenge in managing sensitive customer data within a multi-cloud VMware cloud environment. The core difficulty lies in balancing the operational benefits of data accessibility and integration with the stringent requirements of data privacy regulations. Professionals must navigate the complexities of data sovereignty, consent management, and the secure transfer of data across different geographical locations and cloud providers, all while ensuring compliance with the specific regulatory framework governing the exam. The potential for data breaches, unauthorized access, or noncompliance carries significant legal, financial, and reputational risks. Correct approach analysis. The correct approach involves a comprehensive data governance strategy that prioritizes customer consent and adheres to data localization principles where mandated. This means implementing robust mechanisms for obtaining explicit consent for data processing and storage, particularly when data is to be transferred or processed outside the customer's primary jurisdiction. It also necessitates understanding and applying the principles of data minimization and purpose limitation, ensuring that only necessary data is collected and processed for clearly defined purposes. Furthermore, this approach requires leveraging VMware cloud security features and configurations to enforce access controls, encryption, and auditing, aligning with the regulatory obligations for data protection. This aligns with best professional practice by proactively addressing compliance requirements, mitigating risks, and building customer trust through transparent and secure data handling. Incorrect approach is analysis, an approach that prioritizes immediate operational efficiency by broadly sharing customer data across all available cloud regions without explicit consent or a clear understanding of data sovereignty implications, is professionally unacceptable. This violates fundamental data privacy principles and regulatory mandates regarding consent and data transfer. It creates a high risk of non-compliance, leading to potential fines and legal action. Another incorrect approach would be to implement a blanket policy of restricting all data processing and transfer, even for legitimate business purposes that have customer consent. While seemingly cautious, this approach hinders innovation and service delivery, failing to leverage the capabilities of VMware Cloud effectively and potentially impacting customer experience without a clear regulatory basis for such a restriction. This demonstrates a lack of understanding of risk-based compliance and operational requirements. A third incorrect approach involves relying solely on the default security settings of the cloud providers, without a thorough assessment of the specific data being handled and the applicable regulatory requirements. This passive approach fails to account for the nuances of data classification, access control, and the specific obligations under the relevant regulatory framework, leaving potential compliance gaps and security vulnerabilities. Professional reasoning. Professionals should adopt a risk-based, compliance-first decision-making framework. This involves 1. Understanding the specific regulatory framework applicable to the data being handled. 2. Conducting a thorough data inventory and classification to identify sensitive data and its jurisdictional implications. 3. Implementing robust consent management processes that are granular and auditable. 4. Designing data architectures and workflows that respect data sovereignty and localization requirements. 5. Leveraging VMware Cloud security and governance features to enforce policies and controls. 6. Regularly reviewing and updating data governance policies and technical controls to adapt to evolving regulations and business needs. 7. Prioritizing transparency with customers regarding data handling practices.